thank you very much, fellow patriots, for coming out on a day like today. I know we could all be out golfing right now. We could all be out, having a barbecue with friends and family. But I know that I'm here, and I know you're all here for the same reason. It's because we are trying to save America. Thank you very much for being willing to come out and help us with that. Thank you. My name is Randy Wood. I'm the Senior Field Director for Americans for Prosperity, Michigan. I like to say we've got Annie Patnoy, she's the pretty one in our organization. We've got Scott Hagerstrom, he's the smart one. He's the policy wonk. I lift heavy things. That's all I do. The fellow team members are all wearing green shirts today, so if you have any questions throughout the day, feel free to pull one of them aside and ask them. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. AFP-Michigan is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to fair treatment under the law for everyone. It's dedicated to freedom, economic freedom, and lower taxes. It's not a complex mission. Lower taxes, more economic freedom is what we're about. Sometimes, because of that, we're accused of being Republican. Sometimes, because of that, we're accused of being Democrat. Sometimes we're accused of just being crazy whack jobs, or wacko birds, if you will. Our first guest is a state senator who we do not endorse candidates. We never will. However, I cannot think of a single economic issue that he has been on the wrong side of. And with that being said, Senator Patrick Colbeck, if you could please come up and say a few words.
Well, a lot of the people that helped get me into office are here, which is great to see, and I really appreciate y'all coming out here. But today I want to talk about, taxing away our economic prosperity. And we got tax day coming up here pretty soon. That's how I started getting engaged in politics. I went to the first tax day rally out in Plymouth, and Angie and I, who'd never been politically active at all, started looking at the landscape of what was going on in our country and said, we really need to do something about this. So we, believe it or not, both of us are pretty much introverts, or at least we started that way. Now we've been kind of forced out of the nest and doing a lot of other things. But this passion point about us losing our freedom, one tax at a time, one policy at a time, really woke us up. Especially it was Obamacare. That was the #1 kicker for us. And there's a lot of people in here, I kind of call it, that want to get into this mode of SimCity governance. You know what I mean by that? How many of you guys ever heard of this video game called SimCity? What they do is you're in control of a whole civilization here, and it's for you to go off and make sure that everybody moves the way you want them to move, that they build the right buildings that you want them to build. All that stuff is controlled by you in this megalomaniac little power struggle here. Well, that's the way we're kind of headed as a country right now. And one of their best mechanisms of going off and getting the power to go off and do that with us, frankly, is via taxation. How many people here think that it would be a good idea if we moved elections to April 15th?
No, April 16th.
April 16th? All right.
April 19th.
Well, we got early voting going on too, so there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. But I think that would drastically change the perspective. I got to tell you, when I came in as a legislator, my first exposure to the political process after being elected was to go to this forum. I ran out of Michigan State. It was a legislative leadership forum. And what they instructed us to do, the purpose of this forum was to instruct all the newbies on all the policy issues facing the state. And they were so kind as to provide solutions for all these policy issues. And every single one of these solutions involved some sort of tax or fee increase. And I got to tell you, there's folks on both sides of the political spectrum that got together and said, wait a minute, there's more to this story than what we're hearing. And we got together and built some friendships. And that freshman class, I was the only senator there. Because, well, actually, no, Tom Casperson was there as well. He'd been out of office for a while. But most of these guys were from the House. And folks on both sides of the political spectrum, we got together and said, no, guys, we need to start looking at the expense side of the ledger. And just to show you how popular that approach is, I went to a forum when I was newly elected out in one of the school districts in my district, and everybody was sitting there saying, yeah, we need more funding for schools, we need more funding for schools. And I go, well, wait a minute. Before we go off and raise taxes to pay for our schools, how are we spending the money we currently have? And that's been a simple question that I've asked across the board, whatever the topic is before you talk about raising taxes, what are we spending the money we currently have on? Now, how many people here are convinced that the only way to solve our road funding issue is via higher taxes? Good, I'm not in the wrong place. I just want to make sure. There's a lot of people right now that are using the crisis, and you know, what is it, Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. They're using the crisis of creators, you know. I'm an aerospace engineer, that's my background, but I don't like driving on the moon when it comes to going to work. So, this is a case where everybody's using this crisis of the fact that our roads are in really bad shape. And they're using that crisis to drive the opportunity to go off and increase taxes. I'm telling you, that's the wrong solution. There's so many other ways to go off and do it, and I'm not going to get into the details here, we've got short time, but if you want to find out alternative solutions to raising taxes, please go to morninginmichigan.com. I've got something called the Solution Center up there. And in there we talk everything about healthcare, and I don't know if you guys are aware, but we're working on an alternative to Medicaid expansion, which, by the way, please note, Medicaid expansion is Section 2001 of the Affordable Care Act. It is Obamacare. It's not separate. It's not Medicaid expansion and Obamacare. Medicaid expansion is Obamacare. And it doesn't provide good care for people, and it does so for so much more money than we can afford. So there are better ways out there, and they feature getting the government out of the way. It's just, you know, go to Solution Center. Go to my Solution Center at morninginmichigan.com for more info. The other side is looking at, you know, when I asked the question, how are we spending the money we currently have? We've got an asset out there that we didn't have before. We passed some landmark transparency legislation a while back, and it was, you can see the fruits of that if you go to 10millionaccountants.com. So if you're sitting there and you want to go off and identify alternatives to raising taxes and you want to help out with your legislators and get engaged, go off and go through that itemized list in an Excel spreadsheet. I didn't do this PDF stuff where it's right copy protected so you can't analyze it and move the numbers around. We actually have an Excel spreadsheet up there that you can sort through and actually prioritize what you think should be the spending priorities here for the state of Michigan. And focus in on the general fund items that you can free up. So go to 10millionaccountants.com, let your legislators know that, no, I'd rather spend $25 million on roads instead of on film incentives, for example. Maybe that's a good place to start. And we need to stop going off with the priorities that have been identified by folks that don't necessarily have your best interests in mind, and actually start telling them, no, these are our priorities for a change. And they include keeping money back in our pockets. So, you know, lots happened. It's tough for me to summarize everything that's happened over the last 3 years, but I hope you guys are getting an appreciation that we're moving the needle in the right direction, especially in the state of Michigan. And jumping applause, that's good. No, hey, there's a lot of work. But I want to make sure that you understand the role that you have played in moving that needle. I mean, the folks that got engaged 3 years ago, we're not the political elite here. They're folks that never were engaged in politics before. How many here are new to politics or getting engaged in politics over the last 3 years? So pretty much at least half the crowd here is brand spanking new. And I can tell you, you're probably being woken up by the same things that I'm being woken up by. And people are starting to listen up in Lansing. They may not be listening very well in DC yet, but they're going to get their wake-up call again this election. But I think what you guys are doing, you need to stop and take a step back and say, this is amazing. Now we've got folks that used to be sitting out here that are now serving up an elected office up in Lansing. We've got people that used to be sitting out here that are serving up in places like the Attorney General's office. We've got people that were sitting out here that are precinct delegates that are going off and getting engaged in the process. We've got people out here that are going back into the classrooms in our schools that are sitting there saying, guys, it's time to go off and show an appreciation for what makes us a prosperous country. So I want to just end by saying, thank you very much for all your efforts. We really need you to stay engaged. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting in meetings where it's like, well, how do you think the grassroots is going to respond to this? Well, you know, maybe we should just hold off until after the primary or anything like that. And I'm telling you guys, they have you on the radar. Just got to keep up the good fight. I know it's not always easy. Believe me, I know it's not always easy. But we need your help. So please stay engaged, keep engaged. Thanks to Americans for Prosperity. Congratulations to Annie for her new baby about 3 weeks ago, was it, or 3 or 4 weeks ago? And I just want to commend you guys for everything that you're doing. Keep up the good fight, okay?
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate you being here. Our next speaker, I hate to say needs no introduction because then I'm going to introduce him. The word legend gets thrown around quite a bit these days. To me, it's overused and it's often misappropriated. Our next guest is truly a legend in Michigan broadcasting. For longer than I've been on this planet, our next guest has been the greatest voice in Michigan radio, and I'm truly honored to have him here with us today. When you do political work for a living the way I do and the way the rest of us do, you deal with a lot of celebrities. You deal with a lot of egos. You deal with a lot of unique personalities. I can say without a doubt, the most pleasant, humble, and generous man that I have had the privilege to working with is going to be speaking to you next, Mr. Frank Beckmann. Thank you very much for being here.
Man, I didn't live up to that introduction. I had a spot for my water here, so if I reach during the course of my remarks this morning, please excuse me. Sheesh, legend. A legend longer than he's been alive. I mean, think about that. Yeah, he's very young. Is there a spot there? Oh, what will they think of next? You know what? That's why I love this country. Somebody without a government subsidy thought of that. I want you to realize that. You know, how many of you were at my last address, Americans for Prosperity? I wanted to check so I could see if I could use the same material. Obviously that's up. But, you know, I mentioned it last time I spoke at one of these gatherings that I think Americans for Prosperity, while it doesn't need to change its name, I think should add sort of a subheading under that that turns it around and says Prosperity for Americans, because that's really what this organization stands for and why I admire it so much. Randy, thank you for the kind words of introduction. It's very kind of you. You had to rub in the weather, the nice weather outside, and talk about golf. And here I am recovering from rotator cuff surgery, and I won't play till July or so. And so thanks for just reminding me again about that. It was interesting this last couple of weeks when I got the call from Scott Hagerstrom about, well, he said this event was coming up, this tax day event. And he said we were looking for somebody to speak. And we need somebody who's really committed to defending the Constitution, who believes in individual freedoms, and who at the same time is warm and witty and intelligent and charming, and we think we found him. I was beaming, of course, and he said, unfortunately, Justin Amash is stuck in Washington and won't be able to be there. Would you be able to come? And I said, are you kidding me? Yes, I will. And then when I found out that I'll also be sharing this podium today with the founder of the Freedom Cigar Club, Tony Katz, I said, I'm in, baby. That's all it takes. Tony's here now. We got a chance to, I got something for you too, my friend. Yeah.
Just do this now?
Yeah, let's do it now. This is Tony Katz, everybody. All right, so we got Ashton for Padron.
We did about even.
Yeah. That one's got a bigger ring gauge, so you know what they say about bigger ring gauges?
I like my cigars small like my government.
You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. You know, I mentioned to Tony on the air the other day. I said, I don't give a lot of speeches. And I don't know, I've always been self-conscious about doing it and wondering whether it's the right place for me to do that. And as time has gone on, I've sort of begun to re-examine that. And the reason is because I encourage so many other people, like you, to get involved. And I thought to myself, I said, you know, Frank, you're being kind of a hypocrite. And you're taking yourself really away from how you grew up in one sense. You expect other people to get involved, then why shouldn't you be involved and speak about what you believe in? And I thought about it more and more and more in self-reflection, and I thought back to my younger days. Back when I was one of those long-haired people. I know it's hard to believe, but there was that day, way back when. I had the long hair going. I had the Prince Valiant box. If you ever saw my wedding pictures, you'd know. The wedding pictures from that special night with my first wife. Who's still my wife, by the way. It's been more than 40 years, just for the record. But, you know, back in the day, back when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was out there in the streets of Warren. I was in the Vietnam War protests, and you know, I stood up against the government, and I still remember back then the things that we demanded, that our government, you know, stop interfering with other nations, and stop taking young people in the prime of their life and putting them into the military, and I had all kinds of complaints back then, along with other young people. And I marched in the streets and carried signs and shouted all the slogans, the popular slogans back then. And, you know, we were told, you know, you don't change the system by screaming in the streets. You change the system by getting involved in it. And, you know what's true? It's true. Back then, that comment was meant for the likes of Bill Ayers, who was carrying out terrorist activity, and blowing up government buildings and trying to blow up police stations, and winding up killing his own girlfriend and some of his own compatriots when they screwed up making a bomb that was intended for a military gathering. And it was intended for people like that. That's not how you change government, through anarchy, through tyranny. You change it by getting involved in the system. Well, guess what? They get the message. Because right now they are the government. And they are the system. And they did it from within. They went ahead, they organized, and they got involved. And now, they're practicing something entirely different than they espoused back then. You know, I still remember those good old days with the long hair and the marches in the streets, as I said, out in Warren. And I remember demanding that you, the man, whether you're a government official or a leading educator running a school somewhere, school president, listen to us. Listen to us. You owe it to open up the conversation to everybody. You've got to have the discussion with everybody. You have to listen to us just like we have to listen to you. And that was the mantra in our education system, our higher education system. That's exactly what we would do. We would listen to all voices. We wanted this exchange of ideas. Well, guess what? Once the likes of Bill Ayers and the far left got control of that system, the conversation stopped. All that mattered was their idea. And that's extended so far now. You know, I recommend to as many people as possible, and I do it to you for those of you who may not have read this book yet. But there's a book that ought to be required reading. And I would recommend Randy you buy a whole batch and give them away at Americans for Prosperity meetings. It's written by a professor from Boston University by the name of Angelo Codavilla. And when he wrote it, I remember Rush Limbaugh, that's where I first heard about it. Rush mentioned it. And I said, I got to get this book, and I got it and read it. It's not that long, it's only 13,000 words or so. And I was blown away by this man's insight and his dedication to what our country really stands for. The book is called The Ruling Class, and the subtitle is How They Corrupted America and What We Can Do About It. And in describing the ruling class, Codavilla describes this whole group of elites. And it's not just the rich that he's including in that. It's not the rich at all. That's not what he means. And it's not just leftists. It's anyone who draws their livelihood from the government and the connection to exert power. That's the ruling class he was talking about. And my goodness, are we witnessing that now? They're based on the philosophy that your privilege in this country is not granted by merit, it's granted by power. It's granted by power. And when I say it's not limited to the left, it's for a very good reason. Think about what the so-called right is doing in Washington these days. Trying to find ways to get Obamacare implemented now. Giving the president unlimited authority to raise the debt ceiling. This now passes for the principles of conservatism and limited government. And looking for a way to legalize illegal immigrants in this country. Where we have a potential presidential candidate who's trying to give them a pass in Jeb Bush right now. We're witnessing, and I won't even call it a movement anymore because it's reality, and it's an anti-founder reality. Our founders didn't have this in mind. They had in mind limited government, not expanded government, not a government where people who are not only in the public sector as politicians, but those who look for government handouts through entitlements, those who look through government handouts as large businesses with big lobbies, where they're part of this unprecedented expansion of government. Examples, there are plenty. Witness the spending in our country. Witness Obamacare and what it's done. How many of you got to keep your health insurance? How many of you got to keep your doctor? You're looking at an insurance plan that we're told is going to lower costs. It is not. It's raised the cost of health insurance. It's done nothing to lower medical costs so far. It's cost jobs. Doctors are refusing to see patients. Hospitals are laying off people because they can't afford this. You have a system that's forcing your employer to offer policies. This is how they lower costs, right? By demanding that you have policies that include prenatal care for you gentlemen. You got a system that requires that we give free contraceptives to women, but will require co-pays if you want to get some kind of antibiotic for your children. That's the kind of system that we've implemented in this big government. You know, there was a report that came out this last week or so, and I'm just absolutely stunned that it hasn't gotten more attention. And it should, because the people who did this come from one of the leftist institutions at Harvard University, the Institute of Politics. It's their annual report on America. It's 91 pages. And it has put our debt, our nation's debt now, it was $10.6 trillion if you look at the real numbers inherited by Obama. And it's now at $16.7 trillion, okay? It's an increase of 40%. Now, those are just numbers. 40%, 16 trillion, now what's that, right? Have you thought really about